In 1836, when the Muskogee Creek were forced from their ancestral land in Alabama and sent to Indian Territory, some of them brought along the people they had enslaved. Other enslaved families were forced onto cramped boats and shipped down the Alabama River to Indian Territory. Somewhere in the chaos were my ancestors, who were held as slaves by tribal members. In this way, Black slave history and Native American history were knitted together, sadly united and severely connected. The 5 civilized tribes would remain committed to slavery, and in their new homes, they immediately rebuilt racialized Black codes, exploited slave labor, fought slave rebellions, and sided with the Confederacy in the Civil War. All indigenous American cultures had systems of privilege and stature, and among the 5 civilized tribes, slave ownership was a status symbol. Forced copulation and intermarriage between Native Americans and African slaves were common among these tribes. In the civilized tribes, in an economy driven by cotton, wealthy slave owners believed they were superior to blacks and oppressed the blacks they owned. The particular history of my ancestors' struggles and the hardships they encountered during this time, whether enduring the Trail of Tears or surviving on overcrowded boats to Indian Territory, is uncertain. Whatever they faced is lost and buried in Paradise Cemetery within a stone's throw of the property still owned by our family, which my mother always referred to as the 40 acres and a mule property, even though it was actually 160 acres by the time it got to my grandmother. I can only imagine their suffering and the fear embedded in their souls as they were forcibly deported to unknown territory. I fervently hope that their slave owners provided them shoes, proper clothing, food, and a doctor's care for health issues as minimal compensation for their labor. This kind of erasure is not unusual among descendants of people enslaved by Native Americans, although Black presence on the Trail of Tears is a historical fact. The tears our ancestors shed out of sight of slave masters are not part of the history that most people know about the 5 civilized tribes. It's also not common knowledge that after the war, the United States negotiated a new treaty with the Creek Nation, requiring the tribes to emancipate their slaves and to grant them Creek citizenship, making them eligible for voting rights and a share of annuities and land settlements. Upon emancipation, some Creek freedmen decided to stay in the Creek Nation in Indian Territory. Near the turn of the century, Congress passed the Dawes Allotment Act, which broke up tribal land holdings to allot communal land to individuals, allowing them to acquire property. This included the descendants of Creek freedmen. To receive their land allotments and rights as tribal members, people were required to present evidence of their ancestry to the 4-man commission of the 5 civilized tribes, more commonly called the Dawes Commission. Led by Senator Henry Dawes of Massachusetts, the commission registered tribal members into categories, distinguishing between Creek by blood, Creek freedmen, anyone with visible physical traits suggesting African ancestry, regardless of their proportion of Creek ancestry, and intermarried whites. The commission sometimes classified members of the same family into different groups. In other words, my ancestors had to prove who they were in order to receive the land and the rights they deserved for their labor and the hardship their families endured as slaves.